Absolutely. Wow. Well, what an amazing win. Alrighty. Well, let's talk about this case recently. Let's talk about the school coach who was praying on the field, who was fired. What did you guys expect the outcome to be when you brought the case this far forward? I know that you guys, obviously, of course, are focused on winning the case, but did you think there was ever a chance that, perhaps they wouldn't side with him, or perhaps there would be a loss there? And how do you think it got kind of to that point?
Well, I got to tell you, when we first signed up Coach as a client back in 2015, um, and we sat down with him. I remember we went out to a restaurant somewhere there in the Bremerton area, and we sat down and we were talking, and I knew we needed to just be real with him, just as we are with all of our clients. I'm a Marine. Coach is a retired U.S. Marine. And so I had to look him in the eye and say, I'm not going to sugarcoat this for you. I'm going to tell you straight up. We are probably going to lose if we fight this in court. So we need to try to figure out a way to resolve this without going to court. And we thought that we had a really good chance of resolving this with the school district. Even maybe it was just a misunderstanding or something was lost in translation between coach and the school district. And now that we were involved as his attorneys, we could sort of clarify things and say, look, he just wants the ability to pray by himself. He's not asking to pray with anybody else. He just wants the opportunity to pray by himself. And if students want to pray, that's their choice, and they can do that on their own. And coach won't have any part of that. He will just pray by himself. The problem is that the school district refused to meet with us. They refused to come to the negotiating table. They refused to have, civil discussions with us, and they left us with no choice. But we had to file this lawsuit. And as I told Coach, we knew that filing a lawsuit was going to be an uphill climb, especially because we were in the state of Washington, in Seattle. That's not an area that's very friendly to religious freedom or traditional American values or conservative values. There are great people up there. Make no mistake, there are fantastic people in the Seattle area, but unfortunately, the government officials and some of the judges are not as friendly and welcoming to religious freedom. So we lost at the district court stage, which is like the trial level, and we lost again at the Ninth Circuit, which was really no surprise because I think most people are pretty familiar with the Ninth Circuit's reputation as being probably the most liberal circuit in the country, and but the Ninth Circuit, the ruling that they issued was so extreme, was so hostile to the Constitution that, number one, we felt that we had to do something to try to correct that. Because if we didn't do something to try to reverse the Ninth Circuit, it would leave devastation in its wake in terms of the Constitution and people's rights and freedoms. And two, it was so extreme, we thought, you know what? This might actually be the type of case that the Supreme Court is willing to take to correct. And so we kind of had that magic combination there, and we filed our what's called a cert petition. That's the shorthand for basically asking the Supreme Court to take your case, and that was in 2019, if I recall, 2018, 2019, and the Supreme Court said no, we're not going to hear this case yet. And they said because there are some factual questions that the trial court has not yet resolved that need to be resolved. And once you get answers to those questions, those factual questions, then we might be willing to take a look at this case. So they sort of gave us a lifeline, right? And we had to go all the way back to the trial court again. We got answers to those questions. We then had to go back to the Ninth Circuit again for a second time. We lost again at the Ninth Circuit, which was very frustrating, very disappointing, but not surprising. And then we went back to the Supreme Court a second time. And that's what brings us to what just happened, just a few days ago, which was this incredible victory, not just for Coach Kennedy, but for all of America, because it sent a huge message to all of America that religious freedom is still here, it's still in the Constitution, and we now have a Supreme Court that recognizes it and says, you do not give up your religious freedom, you do not give up your constitutional rights just because you happen to be on the clock, even if your employer is the government, right? Because he worked for a public school district. You do not give up your constitutional rights and freedoms just because you work for the government, even if you're on the clock. And Americans do not have to choose between their faith and their job. So what a